So today the DS Incubator starts a new series. It is about working with a terminal, and it is based on this lesson from the Carpentries. It's called the Unix shell. It has a bunch of topics like nicely summarized in the lesson schedule. I will be quite opinionated about what we cover and what we don't cover because I would like to focus on the things that I believe that will give like the most value with the least content. And with that intent today, I'm going to be walking through the entire syllabus, giving an overview of the whole picture that I see as of today, but also with intention of sharing it openly, and in case that there's someone here in the room or someone else finds that I'm planning to cover is too much or too little, something I'm missing, and things like that. As usual, the DS incubators have a repository associated to them. This series is called ds.terminal, that the repository that hosts the material for this series. And as usual, each chapter has its own little folder with a README file that kind of walks through the content. But before I get there, I would like to kind of show you very briefly the overview of the series. So the goal is not to make you an expert in the terminal. It's basically to help you understand what the terminal is and what powers it has, and then you can decide if it's a good fit for you. Overall, I'm gonna be aiming to cover how to navigate your file system and modify it by moving files, copying files, deleting files, and things like that. Then how to perform complex actions by composing multiple simple commands, which we can do with a command called the pipe, or with an operator called the pipe, in the same way or similar to what the pipes that we have in R, for example. Also, how to find things, either find files in your system or find text patterns inside files. Do one thing multiple times, this idea of iterating. How to create your own little commands that help you do a lot of things with just a few keystrokes. The idea of reusing code. And also how to customize your terminal to make it either nicer or safer. So I'm hoping here to demonstrate that the terminal is kind of for everyone at 2 degrees and also beyond. But I understand that there are a lot of the things that you can do with the terminal you can also do with the more common graphical user interfaces. So the terminal is no more nor less than a tool to interact with other tools. And usually we do that by clicking buttons and opening windows and closing windows and things like that. So I understand that there is not a lot of motivation many times, and it's only until you hit like a wall that you say, well, I have to do this thing 500 times, and doing this by clicking things is not gonna get me there very quickly or efficiently, and it's error prone. It's only then that usually we think, okay, maybe I need to program what I want to do. But then we also have R, and then it's a higher level language. It's more expressive. So if you know how to do things in R, you may wonder, why would I even worry about the terminal? So a big part of this series is to also help you decide when to not use the terminal. So hopefully with what you see here, you will see opportunities for using the terminal and opportunities for replacing the terminal for another tool that is a better fit for that specific job. So let's jump right into today's lesson, which is the overview, and then you can also skim at your own time this README file that suggests what I'm thinking of showing next time, and then the at least 2 more meetups after that. But let's jump into that. So I'm gonna go to the folder 00 overview, which basically touches over the whole syllabus as I imagine it today. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move my my list of things here to the left. I'm gonna make it small in the sense of that it fits. Takes up not a lot of space in my screen, but big enough hopefully so that you can read it. And I'm gonna open here a terminal. Later in the lessons we will cover how you can access a terminal if you don't have one that you like already. But today I don't want to waste time with that. I just want to get into the contents. So one of the first things we're going to be learning to do with the terminal is to navigate your file system in a very similar way to what you already do when you have a file explorer like this one here. So in the terminal to the right, I have something similar to what you see here on the left, which is more familiar. So I would like to move you from familiar to not so familiar to help create those bridges in the knowledge in your brain. So here on the left, you see I'm here. Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm the only one. I see like your I don't see the terminal.
The full thing. Okay, cool.
No,
Let's
let's
try to fix that. So I'm gonna unshare and share again. Maybe I clicked the wrong button. Thank you for that.
It was frozen for me also, but then it got better.
Okay. Okay, suggesting that the screen was sharing, but in an odd way. How about now? Do you see to the left something that looks like a file browser and to the right a terminal? Boring black?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So this part is basically to show you that with the terminal you can do the same things that you do already with a file browser, for example. Just move around and look inside folders and files and stuff. Folders, not files now. Which is not enough motivation to use a terminal, maybe, right? So, for example, here on the left, I have a folder inside my home directory that is called desktop, so I can click on it to see its contents. The same thing I can do here. The issue here is that I'm not seeing where I am or what contents this place has. So to see where I am, I can print the working directory, pwd. So I'm in home, so this is the home for this specific system. And imagine this is my computer. So I can list the files and do an ls list to see the content. So now I see something similar to what I saw before when I was here in home, and I could see the desktop there. If I wanted to list the contents in a different way, like more similar to what I see on the left, I could do a -l, which modifies the command. So in this case, ls is a command, and -l modifies that command and makes the list different. To make it even more similar, I could do just -1, which will show one column of that. So now they are very similar. So let's see what else we can do. So that's the idea of moving, of listing things and knowing where I am. But also I may want to move inside a directory, as I do here, clicking the folder. So what if I want to get into desktop? Well, then I change directory into desktop, and I don't have to type the whole thing. Usually your terminal could have autocomplete, so I can press the tab to let the terminal complete the word that I want to type. And if I type just D, it won't work. It will give me many options because there's many things that start with a D. But then as soon as I disambiguate this, terminal will know that the hitting the tab is that one thing that only matches what I typed. So change directory to desktop, and now I do another ls there. Let's say that I want the -1 version of it, so that I guess just one column, and that's all there is. There is just one folder, exactly as it's here. So I could navigate inside here and then say inside here, and the same thing I could do here. So I can recover all commands with the up arrow, and then if I want to move inside or look inside directories, again I can do also the autocomplete. So I could start typing sh and autocomplete, and then I can hit autocomplete again, even without knowing the contents of that directory. I hit twice and I get a list of things that are options to me, and now I start typing north and hit the tab again, and there I am. So I can see the contents of that specific directory. So up arrow to recover the command, enter to run it, and if I want to clear, I can type clear, or I can just press Ctrl and L. So let's do another ls -1 to see where I am standing now. Here it is. Okay, so far it's moving around. That's things that we're going to be covering in kind of depth later on. The idea of customizing your shells. Okay, so there is a ton of customizations and we won't cover many of them. But what I would like to demonstrate, for example, is that here is very bad to not have a feedback of where I am. And all the time having to type print working directory is kind of annoying. So I would like to have this information all the time in my command prompt. The prompt is this $ symbol next to the blinking thingy, to the blinking cursor. So what I can do is modify the terminal. I'm gonna do this one thing just to demonstrate how customizable it is. I know that the commands that I'm typing here are not like intuitive at all, but what I can do with this is modify my prompt so that when I clear it, I always know where I'm standing. So I don't need to type print WT. It will print the same thing, except that in this case, it's showing it's expressing the home of this computer in an abbreviated way with this tilde symbol, which means the whole thing here. Okay, so let's see what else. Well, the idea is that you can compose things very easily with the terminal to do things like, for example, not only using one, before I show you how I can do it, for example, ls to see the contents of this, I can change directory inside this. Let's change directory inside North Pacific, for an example. So here, if I do an ls here, let me show you this. If I do an ls here, I can list the files, but there is more that I can do to ls, more flags that I can do other than simply say the -1 that I show you. I could start combining flags, like I can do ls -l, that will show a lot of details, and then after that, let me open this bigger and clear this and show it again. So pay attention to the order where I have, for example, the .sh files at the bottom and the text files at the top. So I could combine flags with like not only L to list things as you are seeing them now, but also to for example, sort them in order of size. So I could do something like S will add information about the size of the files, H will make it in a human readable way, and uppercase S will sort the files by size. So now, actually, this is the output is the same, but I could also do another flag here, R, to reverse the sort, and now you see how the SH files have been moved to the top because those files are the smaller ones, and I sorted this by size. So this is similar to what you would do, for example, here, if you click on a folder that shows a bunch of files like this one, and then you sort by size, clicking these little drop downs here. Okay, so moving on to what else we might do. So the idea of modifying your system is also important. Beyond just listing what you have, you may want to create a folder, for example. So let's move back a little bit, which I can do with ... to go back, and again with ... to go back. So I'm here at the desktop. Let's see what I have here, and let's create a new directory with makedir. I forgot to pass an argument, and the terminal tells me, gives errors as R does, for example, to tell me that I'm doing something wrong. So makedir A, so the directory is going to be called A. ls will show A, and now I can create a file with touch, for example. Inside A, I'm going to create a file called b.txt, so that's a file. So now ls shows the contents of this directory, but ls with A gives me the contents of the folder A inside desktop, and there is the file. So we are going to learn how to create files, also how to remove files, which is very dangerous. So I could do a remove, and to make it safer, I can type a flag that is an interactive remove to get a confirmation that what I want to do is the right thing, and then type the name of the file that I want to remove, and then I'm going to be asked for a confirmation. I can say no, or I can say yes. In this case, I'm going to say yes. So the idea of navigating is covered. The idea of modifying your system by adding files, maybe moving them from one place to the other, and so on. And then the idea of composing commands. We saw how to compose flags of one command, but you can also compose multiple commands. with this pipe operator that allows you to feed the output of one command as the input to another command. And then you might even, send the results to a file, for example. Something similar to what you might do, for example, in R. So to show that, let's change directory to, let's see what we have here, the shell, lesson data. Let's see what we have, the north. Let me remind, okay, yeah, so let's use the north folder here. Let's list the files. And so I may want to count, for example, the lines of each file in this directory. So I can first do word count, counts not only words, but also counts lines if I say -l. And to make sure that I'm gonna get the count for everything here, I use the asterisk here, which stands for kind of all. And that alone will give me this kind of summary, right, with the number of lines that each file has. Note how the first ones have 300 lines and the ones at the bottom have 17 and 10. And what if I wanted to sort that in a different way? Well, I could, use the command sort, but I would like to feed it to the output of doing the first command. So for that, what I can do is use the pipe. So the result of computing the lines count for that folder, then I pass to sort. So then you can see how the output here is very different to the output that is not sorted, because the sorted, the sort is moving files up, right? And then if I wanted to redirect the output not just to the console but to a file, let's call it out.txt, I can use this greater than symbol that will send the standard output that you see on the console into a file. So now if I clear my console with Ctrl L, do an ls, I will see that there is an out.txt file. And no surprisingly, if I show the contents with cat of out.txt, I should see the same thing that I saw before on the terminal. Okay.
Oh, it's 420.
Thanks very much, CJ. The other two things that I will like to cover in part 2 and 3 are fairly advanced. I think part 2 is not super uncommon. And it's the idea of finding things inside files and finding files themselves. So let me actually have this here to the right and this to the left. So before I touch on these ideas to inspire your brain juices, let's make a pause, acknowledging that we have 10 minutes, which is enough to discuss questions and comments. So I'm gonna go back to your faces. So far, do we have any comment or question? Does it sound as something potentially useful? Faria, would you like to go ahead first?
Yeah, can I just ask, so you know how you created the .txt file, right? Can you also create any file with any extension, like a .r file or a .py file? Is that also possible?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because it is. So basically, you can create, at least in the Linux system that I'm using, you can create a file with any extension, which is kind of powerful and dangerous, because I can create a file that inside has R code and call it txt, or the other way around. So the extension is something that will be used by some systems, I understand, to interpret that file as what you promise it contains, but doesn't necessarily force you to match the contents with the extension. Was that clear? Maybe. Basically, yes, I could have pasted test inside a file that I called .r, for example.
Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah. So you have, as a person, you have to be very disciplined, because if you use the misleading extensions, then you will be misled. Alex?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, just sort of a general note for everyone. Maro was moving around pretty quick today, and I know it can be overwhelming to see someone who is good at the terminal doing terminal-y things. use grep and set a lot. So I know those commands, I know those flags, but like I see that Maro's going to be talking about find later on, and like that's one that I don't use that much. I don't know about it. Stack Overflow is your friend. You don't need to remember how to do the thing. You just need to remember that the thing can be done, and then like there is a tutorial for whatever you want to do specifically. Especially because it's worth noting Maro is working on an Ubuntu computer, a Linux computer, and the commands for people on Mac are going to be slightly different in ways that are annoying if you just try to blindly follow the same directions.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, actually, it's a good point now for those who also join later the meetup that what I'm doing now is not hoping to teach you anything, it's hoping to give you an overview, because even if you think, oh, actually, none of this is something that I'm interested in, then you will have saved time by not joining next DS Incubator meetups on this series. But at least I want to kind of unleash very quickly the powers that will be available to you if you stick with this series. And I think a big part of my role in teaching this is in curating what I in my head believe might be that, like 20% that will give you the 20%, the 80% of what you want to do. So I want to give you the minimum amount of content, the minimum amount of tools that will allow you to do a lot. So with this, for example, I realized that if someone like Alex, and actually I confess I also don't use find a lot, maybe I will leave find out, because it is a powerful tool, but there's other ways to do that, and it is a fairly weird command, for example, compared to many other commands in the shell. So with that, I'm also going to give myself some permission to not fully cover the lesson that comes from the carpentries, but to instead think what I, in my experience, and people like me have used or found most useful, and give you just that, so that in maybe 4 meetups you get a fairly useful set of tools. Pretty much, that's the goal. CJ, I see your hand up.
Just a few quick comments. So, one, I was very glad that you very quickly got to the point where you had to make the comment that terminal can be very, very powerful, but also very dangerous, because that pretty much sums it up. Two, I wanted to point out that most Windows users don't have like immediate access to a shell similar to what you're looking at, as Mac users do, albeit that there are some differences. But there are some easy advantages or ways to get that, like using git bash or something like this. You can get a shell similar to what Maro's demonstrating if you're on a Windows machine. And I already forgot the last one. Oh, I was going to say one thing that might be interesting, and maybe it's just me, Alex already mentioned Stack Overflow, but I'm kind of a geek for reading the actual help files. So man is a function that you pull up the functions, the help files for these commands, and in my opinion, like just as I often tell people when teaching R, it pays to get used to reading the man files or the help files or whatever's appropriate for the language and environment that you're using, because they're often expressed in a very similar way. They follow a similar style, and they're very daunting at first, but once you get used to them, it's worth knowing how to kind of use them and look for what you're looking on. So I would maybe suggest to you, Mara, to think about taking some time looking into man files and how to use them. And
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the kind of thing that you learn one thing and empowers you to do many others. So basically, by learning how to read, one help file, then you know how to teach yourself a lot, many other. And it's true. I mean, these days with the internet, you can access help files online, but they are there. Even if you don't have internet access, you still can interpret the help that you have locally installed. That's awesome. Okay, thanks a lot. Maybe I will very briefly say what my plan might be, maybe not show examples here. So the lesson and how it differs, I think the grep command then is something that we may spend quite a bit of time talking about, because if Alex finds it useful and I find it useful, very likely it's going to be useful for you too. defined. Maybe I will be brief on that. It's terribly powerful, but very different to many other commands, so it can be confusing. So maybe I'm gonna touch on it, or maybe not. We'll see. Then the lesson in the Unix shell from the software carpentry covers iteration, showing how to do loops in Bash, basically, because the shell, this is what I'm talking about now. I'm using the word terminal, but you will find other people refer to it as the shell, and the shell is not only the interface to the programs that I'm describing now, but it is also a language, so you can use some like code to do things like iterating. But I find that a lot of the times I need to do iteration, I find it easier to do in a higher level language like R, so I don't think I will spend a lot of time in that. Instead, I'm going to show you just one tool that helps you to iterate over multiple things very quickly, which is Xargs, and then maybe move on. But that's probably something that I would also like feedback from Alex or CJ to see what kind of iteration challenges might be worthwhile solving in the terminal compared to, say, R. And then the lesson also covers shell scripting, which is this idea of, okay, now that you know how to type a few commands, if you type those commands very often, then you might save them in a file and then execute that file as if it was a program on its own. So it's the whole idea of reusing code. And I think that, again, it's useful to know how to reuse some code, like a sequence of a few commands. But that's something you can do with, for example, alias, which is one way to reuse some code. And in this case, I'm showing one example where I transform the rm command, which is famously dangerous, into one that is more safe, because at least I have to confirm that what I'm going to do is what I really want to do. I'm changing one command to a flavor of that command that asks me for confirmation. The -I stands for interactive. So that kind of thing, I think it is very useful to know how to do in the terminal. I do it all the time. But when I need to write more complex operations, I just go to R and do it there, right? So maybe I would prefer to spend time showing you how to then basically call from the terminal programs that you have written in R, something like that. So that would be my own version of the Unix shell lesson from the carpentries. Okay, we are at the end of the meetup, but I acknowledge I mentioned a couple of things, and I would love to hear feedback from people here. Is any departing comment or question before we go? Okay, then we are gonna call it a day. If you do have some ideas after we end this session in a few seconds, then reach out on Slack or Twitter, and I'll think about your ideas. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.